Okay, so the Green Lantern movie. I can't say I just got back from seeing it because the show is done in Illinois, and I saw it in New Orleans. I saw it at the Britannia Theater, 2:30 on Friday, and currently it's like roughly 7 o'clock on Saturday. I had to wait till I actually flew back. So that's when I sit down and kind of think about it. This is pretty much just a straight up origin story, you know. There is a lot of CGI. This movie almost seems like it's tailor-made to win some sort of special effects, even though it'll probably lose to Harry Potter when it comes out next month. When it comes to Ryan Reynolds and his portrayal of Hal, I thought it was actually pretty decent. You know, lots of people cannot stand Ryan Reynolds. I think he's actually a fairly decent actor. You know, he brings over a little bit of brashness, some arrogance, some cockiness, but he also comes off as being someone who's actually just kind of fun, like somebody you'd actually want to spend time with. Now, the character of Hector Hammond, played by, I think it's Peter Sarsgaard, if I said his name wrong, I'm entirely sorry. His character, while his origin is entirely different from, you know, the books, and in the book, one of his origins are he's exposed to a meteor. Another origin is he's exposed to the like the engine of the plane that Aventura crashed in. And this version is different. He's menacing, but in a different way. I almost actually wonder if they would have gotten there's someone else they wanted to actually have do the part for. His name is actually currently escaping me. He played Truman Capote, so he was actually phenomenal, you know, method actor. If you go through the behind the scenes book, it actually shows him, his face with all the crazy stuff done to it. The scenes on Oa were fantastic. I saw this in 3D, so in 3D it's actually pretty decent. The scenes on Oa, it looks amazing. You know, if you had to compare Oa to Asgard, Oa just looks 1,000 times better. My one probably big complaint is when they do show lots of lanterns, it's almost like they're showing them primarily like the Easter egg version. You can see like, oh well, there's steel. Oh, there's a giant guy made of rock. Oh, there's, you know, no mention of Mogo or anything like that. So lots of the lanterns that are in there are kind of there as window dressing for nothing, for lack of a better term. You only really get to see a lot from Tomar-Re, which makes sense. You know, voiced beautifully by Jeffrey Rush. Sinestro, very solid work by Mark Strong. That's not a pun. And Michael Clark Duncan's voiced Kilowog. You see bits and pieces with the Guardians. You know, the Guardian Citadel, having them essentially sit on giant thrones overlooking a central piece. I would have preferred if they would have had more of the enclosure, then you could have seen, you know, Salak would have had an actual speaking role. But all that was done fairly well. Lots of things, of course, are not anywhere at all like the book. Like the books at all. Parallax, as opposed to being, as we currently know him, a giant green, giant yellow like cockroach, like space insect. Instead, it was a guardian who tried to harness the yellow energy of fear, which, you know, was actually pretty interesting. And how Abin encased him, you know, and essentially put him on the planet Ryut. And then as he breaks free, I'm using the term he because it's not technically a he, depending on how you use gender for your guardians. And is going through the process of essentially destroying other planets and becoming more powerful. And the Parallax kills you essentially by you feel fear, and then sucks the fear and kind of your soul out and leaves you essentially a husk. So lots of characters do actually die. Most of them don't get any sort of speaking roles or even have a name associated with them, so you really don't feel the gravity like you should when the Green Lantern is all of a sudden just extinguished. Now, the Hector Hammond part does seem somewhat kind of forced, because while the character in the books is this really kind of dark, malevolent sort of, you know, if Hal Jordan needs his help, he goes, you know, okay, Hal, come here. I want to read your mind, because I want to live through some of your physical and amorous experiences. Because Hector Hammond, for most of his life, has kind of been a less than desirable individual, where Hal has had his fair share of people. Do I think the job they did on Tom that would be Hal Jordan's, best friend, was decent. It was unique, essentially seeing the guy who was the doctor from Smallville in a different role. So therefore, if you want to take the idea of continuity, you actually can't have Tom Welling be Superman in the DC movie universe, because they've already had the Doctor from Smallville play a different role in a different movie. So I've covered over a decent amount of it so far. I think that I'll get to Blake Lively in a second. The movie, I think, really needed a few more. You get to see Green Lantern fight Hector essentially once, and then you get to see Hal Jordan fight Hector essentially once. And those are done fairly well. The first time Hal actually uses the ring on Earth, it's done pretty decently. There's a chopper that's fallen, and he more or less turns the chopper into a hot rod and has to go around a track, which actually done pretty well. And I know one of the big complaints is the constructs don't seem like they actually exist, but from a logical standpoint, it is willpower and imagination forced through a ring doled out by immortals who live in space. It makes sense for it to not look entirely, completely, and totally realistic. I wish they would have had at least one more fight scene between those two. I think that the battle between Hal Jordan and Parallax probably should have included maybe one additional lantern, for that ending climactic battle. And I think that they should have done more with the training sequences. Essentially, you see Hal training against Kilowog, and it's a decent training sequence. I felt like it should have gone a little bit longer. It would have made more sense that when Hal thought he couldn't do it after he sparred with Sinestro, if he would have come back and before going right to pleading his case with the Guardians, or even after pleading his case with the Guardians, if he would have had a little more of training to really help him, gauge and become very good with his ring. Because Sinestro fights Parallax with a handful of lanterns, and they get decimated easily. And then all of a sudden you have a rookie who essentially defends his planet from Parallax and actually ends up defeating him in a fairly decent way. Very, very classic way of doing a Hal Jordan thing. Now, one of the weak parts in this, Blake Lively, while not a horrible actress, probably one of the weaker parts in this. She's supposed to be a pilot, every bit as good as Hal Jordan, as well as a pretty decent business person. Really decent in the world of business, and very level-headed, and is really strong-willed. In this one, she kind of came off almost like she was, still really in love with Hal, as opposed to in the books where there's kind of that she loves Hal, but Hal spurned her in the past, so there's kind of like a love-hate, and there's more of a there seems to be more tension between the two of them than there is in this movie. And of course, they do make quite a few mentions to Star Sapphire. There are some things where they say that she's the rising star. Another time when her call sign is Sapphire, when she turns her head, you actually see the Star Sapphire logo is on her helmet. At the very end of the movie, when all the names are disappearing, her name disappears in a violet-colored light that would be with the Star Sapphires. So all in all, I'll be honest, I left it going, that was a really, really solid movie. Knowing that the concept of the character is really different from the rest of them. Superman, pretty easy. He's an alien who crashes and lands onto a planet raised by a family. Batman, regular everyday person who witnesses this insane act of violence and decides to dedicate his life. Hal Jordan, a character who sees his father die in a plane crash, is an amazing pilot, kind of reckless and cocky, doesn't really care about people that much, who all of a sudden gets picked by a dying alien to wield a ring and be part of essentially an intergalactic peacekeeping force. That is a lot to try to fit in while trying to develop some other characters. The scene where he fights Sinestro was fantastic. I mean, that was probably one of the best scenes they did in the movie. They started fighting off first by using two swords, and Sinestro's essentially browbeating him the whole time he's fighting him. That's when you get to see Hal throw out the chainsaw, as well as use a machine gun, and the machine gun, of course, gets blocked by Sinestro using a shield, very Captain America-esque, and then throwing it at him. So, all in all, very solid. This is definitely a movie that's probably worth seeing in 3D. Is it worth seeing it like, your nighttime? No, this is probably more of a matinee 3D. Now, is there anything that happens after the initial set of credits Yes. Yes, and it does have to do with a scene you see earlier on in the movie. So I'll leave it at that. If you are a Green Lantern fan, yeah, I'm a Green Lantern fan, and by far I was not disappointed by it. But then again, I actually like Ryan Reynolds as an actor. If you hate Ryan Reynolds as an actor, or if there was some over-the-top sort of expectations of how it was going to be, just flying through space, shooting beams at everything, and just be absolutely insane and over the top. No, this one was actually fairly grounded. You had moments on Earth that were okay and trying to develop, the Hal Jordan persona, and then moments on Oa that were fantastic to try to really, really help build up the Green Lantern persona. So that's all I'm gonna say for that. Now I'm gonna get some of probably the spoiler that happens afterwards. So my recommendation is, it is a very good, summer blockbuster superhero movie. I enjoyed it more than Thor. Now, if you saw X-Men First Class, while being entirely different from the comics, was acted beautifully well. This one is not acted anywhere near as well as X-Men First Class, but it makes up for it, with a lot more special effects and a lot more of a fun factor to it. So now getting into the spoiler that happens after the first set of credits. What they reveal during the movie is that the Guardians actually decide to make the Yellow Ring. And Sinestro at first wants to use the Yellow Ring to fight fear with fear. So of course one of the things that happens, forgot. Sinestro, of course, meaning sinister, also ends up meaning left-handed. So one of the things that happens after the first set of credits so you do actually see somebody actually change a suit at the very end of the movie. And of course he changes into what we currently consider to be the Sinestro Corps style suit. Which he didn't get into the blue colored suit. He went straight into, the jagged design yellow. And it looked really, really good. So they definitely do set up for a sequel where, they mention Star Sapphire a lot, and they probably will actually go into the Sinestro Corps.